The ballroom glittered with 1,000 candles, their flames casting writhing shadows across the vaulted ceiling of Thornvale Manor. Isolde Ravenswood stood at the periphery of the dancing crowd, her gloved hands clasped before her, her heart a stone in her chest. The masquerade was meant to celebrate her betrothal and arrangement, sealed 3 months prior between her late father's estate and a lord she had never met. Lord Valerian Nyx. The name alone carried weight in the northern territories, whispered with equal parts reverence and unease. He was reclusive, ancient in lineage, and impossibly wealthy. Her uncle had brokered the match before her father's funeral pyre had cooled, and Isolde had learned of her engagement through a formal letter bearing a black wax seal. She had not seen her betrothed once since the contracts were signed. "You look like a ghost, cousin," murmured Alara, sweeping past in a gown of crimson silk. Her mask was adorned with ruby feathers. "Smile. This is your engagement ball." Isolde forced her lips to curve, though the expression felt foreign. "I cannot celebrate a union with a stranger." "Then find him," Alara urged, nodding toward the sea of masked figures. "He must be here. Perhaps he is watching even now." The thought sent an inexplicable chill down Isolde's spine. She scanned the crowd, searching for someone who might hold himself apart, someone who might be observing rather than participating. But to masks made everyone anonymous lords and ladies, merchants and nobility, all reduced to elaborate facades. "Dance with me," Alara insisted, pulling her toward the floor. "He's watching, I'm certain of it. Show him you are not some wilting flower." Isolde allowed herself to be led into the throng. The orchestra played a haunting waltz, and she moved mechanically through the steps. Alara's laughter bright against the melancholy music, but as they spun, Isolde felt Ida gaze upon her, heavy and unrelenting. She turned her head sharply. At the far end of the ballroom, near the shadowed alcove beneath the minstrel's gallery, stood a figure in black. His mask was simple obsidian and silver, covering the upper half of his face, but there was nothing simple about his presence. He was tall, unnaturally still, and even from across the room, Isolde could feel the weight of his attention like a physical touch. "Elara," she whispered, her breath catching. "That man, do you see him?" But when she looked again, the alcove was empty. "Who?" Alara glanced around, confused. Before Isolde could answer, the music swelled, and the crowd parted. A murmur rippled through the assembly, and Isolde's uncle stepped forward, his voice booming. "My lords and ladies, I present to you the master of Thornvale Manor, Lord Valerian Nyx." The room fell silent. From the shadows beneath the gallery, the figure in black emerged. He moved with an unsettling grace, his steps soundless despite the marble floor. The crowd bowed as he passed, but his eyes, pale as winter moonlight, were fixed solely on Isolde. Her breath stopped. He was beautiful, in the way a blade was beautiful, cold, sharp, and dangerous. His dark hair was tied back, revealing a face carved from marble, ageless and aristocratic. There was no warmth in his expression, no hint of emotion. Yet when his gaze met hers, something stirred in the depths of those pale eyes. "Recognition. Miss Ravenswood," he said, his voice low and precise. He extended a gloved hand. "Will you dance with me?" It was not a request. Isolde's hand trembled as she placed it in his. His fingers closed around hers firm, cool even through the fabric, and he led her to the center of the ballroom. The orchestra began anew, a slower, darker melody, and the crowd receded until it felt as though they danced alone in a cathedral of shadows. "You are surprised," Valerian observed, his tone unreadable. "I did not expect you to attend," Isolde admitted, her voice barely audible over the music. "You have been absent. I have been watching." The words echoed Alara's earlier jest, but there was no humor in them. Isolde looked up, searching his masked face for answers. "Why did you agree to this arrangement, my lord? You do not know me." "No," he agreed softly, "but I know what you are." Confusion flickered across her features. "I am no one of consequence." His hand tightened fractionally on her waist. "You are everything of consequence, Isolde Ravenswood. You simply do not remember." Before she could question him, a scream tore through the ballroom. The doors exploded inward. Figures clad in dark leather and silver armor stormed inside, weapons drawn. At their forefront strode a woman with hair like spilled ink and eyes that burned with fanatical fervor. "Vampire!" she snarled, leveling a crossbow at Valerian. "By the covenant of the Scarlet Dawn, I condemn you." Chaos erupted. Guests fled in every direction. Valerian moved with inhuman speed, pulling Isolde behind him as the bolt whistled past. She stumbled, her hand scraping against the broken stem of a champagne flute, blood-welled, bright and red. Valerian froze. His entire body went rigid, his head turning slowly toward her bleeding palm. For a heartbeat, the mask of control slipped, and Isolde saw something ancient and hungry flicker across his face. "Run," he whispered, his voice raw. But the hunters were already upon them. Valerian's hand closed around Isolde's wrist, and the world blurred. She felt herself lifted, the ballroom dissolving into streaks of gold and black. Wind roared in her ears, and then, abruptly, they were in a corridor she did not recognize, stone walls lit by sconces that flickered with blue flame. The air tasted of ancient dust and something metallic. "Where?" she began. But Valerian pressed a finger to her lips. His eyes, unmasked now, were no longer pale. They glowed faintly, like embers beneath ash. "Silent," he commanded, though his touch remained gentle. Footsteps echoed behind them. The hunters relentless. Valerian pulled her through a hidden doorway, and they descended into darkness. The passage was narrow, the walls damp with condensation. Isolde's injured hand throbbed, blood dripping steadily onto the stone. Finally, they emerged into a vast underground chamber. Shelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound tomes and strange artifacts. A single candelabra burned on a heavy oak table. Valerian released her, stepping back as though her proximity pained him. His jaw was clenched, a muscle ticking beneath the skin. "You are injured," he said, his voice strained. Isolde looked down at her bleeding palm. "It is nothing. It is everything." He moved to a cabinet, retrieving a strip of linen. When he returned, he did not touch her, instead offering the bandage at arm's length. "Bind it. Quickly." She took the cloth, confused by his reaction. "They called you vampire. Is it true?" Valerian turned away, gripping the edge of the table. "Yes." The word hung between them like a blade. Isolde's hands stilled. She had heard tales of coarse stories told to frighten children, but this was no story. The man before her was a creature of legend, and she had been bound to him by legal contract. "Why did you agree to marry me?" she asked again, steadier now. "Because you are the last of your bloodline," Valerian said quietly, "and your blood carries a memory that was stolen from you." He turned, and for the first time, she saw emotion flicker across his features, grief, old and deep. 30 years ago, I made a covenant with your grandmother. She was dying, poisoned by a rival house. I saved her life with my blood, but the exchange came with a price. Her lineage would be bound to mine, protected, until the debt was repaid. Isolde's breath caught. "What debt?" "A life for a life," Valerian said. "Your grandmother promised me her granddaughter, you when you came of age. Not as chattel, but as the key to breaking a curse that has held me captive for 3 centuries. What curse? I cannot love." His voice was hollow. "I am incapable of it. My heart is stone, my emotions muted. I have walked this earth for lifetimes, and I have felt nothing until your blood spilled tonight." He stepped closer, and Isolde saw the war within him, hunger and restraint, locked in battle. "Your blood remembers what I have forgotten," he continued. "When you were born, your grandmother wove a piece of my stolen soul into yours. If I drink from you a willing exchange, the curse will break. But I will not force you. That was my vow." Isolde's mind reeled. "You expect me to believe? No." Valerian's smile was bitter. "I expect you to run, to flee this place and never return. But the hunters will not stop. They know what you are. and they will kill you to prevent the covenant from being fulfilled." As if summoned by his words, the chamber doors shuddered under heavy blows. Valerian moved between Isolde and the entrance, his body a living shield. The doors splintered and the hunters poured in, weapons gleaming. "Surrender the girl, Bloodspawn," the leader commanded. "No," Valerian said simply. They attacked as one. Isolde watched, transfixed, as Valerian became something other. His movements were liquid shadow, impossibly fast. He disarmed the first two hunters without breaking their bones, then caught the third by the throat and lifted her effortlessly. "Leave," he growled, "or I will stop showing mercy." The woman spat in his face. "The Scarlet Dawn does not negotiate with demons." Valerian's expression turned glacial. He released her, and she collapsed, gasping. "Then you will die for your fanaticism." But before he could strike, Isolde stepped forward. "Stop!" Her voice cracked through the chamber like a whip. Every eye turned to her. She stood trembling but resolute, her bandaged hand raised. "I will go with them. If it ends this bloodshed, I will go." "No." Valerian's voice was absolute. "You said I have a choice," Isolde challenged. "Then let me make it." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or pain. He lowered his hand slowly. The hunter leader smiled, cruel and victorious. She gestured to her companions. "Take her." They moved forward, but Valerian's voice stopped them cold. "If you harm one hair on her head," he said, each word sharp as glass, "I will hunt every member of your order. I will burn your sanctuaries. I will turn your righteous crusade into a funeral march. Do you understand me?" The leader hesitated. In that moment of uncertainty, Isolde made her choice. She tore the bandage from her hand and pressed her bleeding palm to Valerian's chest. "Then protect me," she whispered. Their eyes met, and the world exploded into light. The light was not gentle. It erupted from the point where Isolde's blood touched Valerian's chest, a searing brilliance that drove the hunters back with cries of agony. Isolde felt it too, a burning that raced through her veins like liquid fire, connecting her to something vast and ancient. Images flooded her mind. A woman with her face standing in a moonlit garden. A man kneeling before her, his hand pressed to his heart. A promise spoken in a language Isolde did not know, but somehow understood. A life for a life. A soul for a soul, until the debt is paid in blood and love. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light vanished. Isolde collapsed. Valerian caught her before she struck the floor, his arms encircling her with unexpected tenderness. She could feel his heartbeat slow, steady, impossibly real beneath her cheek. What was that?" she gasped. "The Covenant recognized you," Valerian murmured. His voice held a new quality wonder, raw and unguarded. "The bond has awakened." The hunters had fled, the chamber empty save for the two of them and the lingering scent of scorched fabric. Valerian lifted Isolde effortlessly and carried her to a velvet divan against the far wall. He set her down with a care that contradicted his predatory nature. "Your hand," he said, kneeling beside her. Isolde looked down. The wound had closed, leaving only a faint silver scar in the shape of a crescent moon. "It is healed," she whispered. "The Covenant protects its vessels," Valerian explained. He did not touch her, but his gaze remained fixed on the scar. "But the hunters will return. They know now that the bond is active. They will bring greater numbers, blessed weapons. We must leave Thornvale before dawn." "Where will we go?" "North. To the Shadowfell Mountains. There is a sanctuary there, warded against intrusion. You will be safe while I deal with the Scarlet Dawn." Isolde's eyes narrowed. "You intend to fight them alone?" "I have survived 3 centuries of enemies more dangerous than zealots," Valerian said, rising. "They are an inconvenience, nothing more. They nearly killed you tonight. They surprised me." He turned away, his shoulders tense. "It will not happen again." Isolde stood, though her legs trembled. "My lord Valerian, if this bond is as powerful as you claim, should we not face them together?" He looked at her sharply. "You know nothing of combat." Nothing of the world beyond your estate's walls. You would be a liability. The words stung, but Isolde lifted her chin. Then teach me. If my blood holds power, if I am meant to break your curse, do not treat me as porcelain. Treat me as a partner. For a long moment, Valerian said nothing. Then, slowly, a faint smile curved his lips, the first genuine expression she had seen from him. You are more like your grandmother than I anticipated, he said softly. Very well, but you will follow my commands without question. Hesitation will get you killed. Agreed. He moved to the far wall and pressed a hidden lever. A section of stone swung inward, revealing a passage lit by luminescent moss. This leads to the stables. We ride within the hour. As Isolde followed him into the passage, she felt the scar on her palm pulse with warmth. The bond was not merely protective, it was alive, a thread connecting her to the enigmatic vampire lord who had become her unwilling guardian. And somewhere deep within her chest, beneath fear and confusion, a dangerous curiosity bloomed. They emerged into a moonlit courtyard. The stables were empty save for 2 horses, one black as midnight, the other pale as bone. Valerian approached the black stallion, stroking its muzzle with uncharacteristic gentleness. This is Noctis, he said. He has carried me through a dozen wars. Isolde reached for the pale horse, but it shied away, nostrils flaring. She does not trust easily, Valerian observed. Her name is Luna. She was your grandmother's mount. Isolde froze. My grandmother rode her? Yes, I kept her after Eleanor passed. I thought. He trailed off, then shook his head. It does not matter. She is yours now if you can earn her trust. Isolde extended her scarred palm slowly, Luna's dark eyes fixed on the crescent mark, and after a heartbeat, she lowered her head, allowing Isolde to touch her. Good, Valerian said quietly. The bond recognizes you through all things. They mounted in silence and rode through the gates of Thornvale just as the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky. Valerian kept them to the forest paths, away from roads and villages. Isolde clung to Luna's reins, her body aching from the unfamiliar exertion. As the sun climbed higher, Valerian led them to a cave hidden behind a waterfall. The interior was cool and dry, the walls veined with quartz that caught the light. We rest here until nightfall, he said, dismounting. The sun weakens me. I will not risk travel in daylight. Isolde slid from Luna's back, her legs nearly buckling. Valerian caught her elbow, steadying her. And for a moment they stood close enough that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, signs of laughter from lifetimes ago. You did well, he said, releasing her. Rest, I will keep watch. But as Isolde settled onto a smooth stone, exhaustion dragging at her consciousness, she saw Valerian move to the cave's entrance. He stood silhouetted against the waterfall, his expression distant. Valerian, she called softly. What did my grandmother mean to you? He did not turn. She was the only person in 300 years who looked at me and saw not a monster, but a man. She believed I could be saved. And do you believe it? Finally, he glanced back. In the dim light, his eyes were no longer cold. I am beginning to, he whispered. And as Isolde drifted into sleep, she felt the bond hum between them, a promise, a curse, and perhaps a fragile hope. Isolde awoke to darkness and the sound of rain hammering against stone. For a disoriented moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned. The cave, the journey, the vampire lord keeping watch at the entrance. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from sleeping on rock. Valerian stood where she had last seen him, unmoving as a statue. The waterfall beyond had swollen with the storm, its roar filling the cave. He had not slept vampires, did not need sleep, she realized, and there was something unsettling about his stillness. How long was I asleep? Isolde asked, her voice hoarse. 6 hours. Valerian did not turn. Night has fallen. We can travel safely now. Isolde rose, brushing dust from her ruined ball gown. The silk was torn. the hem muddy. She felt acutely aware of her dishevelment, though Valerian gave no sign of noticing. "There is a stream nearby," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "You may wash if you wish. We have time before the hunters pick up our trail. Will they find us? Eventually." His tone was matter-of-fact. "But I have sent word to an old ally. He will meet us at the border of the Shadowfell. From there the wards will shield us." Isolde approached him cautiously. In the dim light, she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched behind his back. "You have not fed," she said quietly. Valerian's shoulders stiffened. "That is not your concern. You are weakened. I felt it when you caught me earlier. Your hands were trembling. I said it is not your concern." His voice turned sharp, almost desperate. "Do not press this, Isolde." But she had seen something in his eyes when her blood spilled, a hunger that was more than physical. It terrified her, yet she could not ignore the truth. If Valerian fell, she would be defenseless. "If the bond requires my blood," she began, "then take what you need." He turned on her with inhuman speed, his eyes blazing. "You do not understand what you offer. I am not some parlor trick vampire from Gothic novels. When I feed, I feel everything your fear, your pain, your life. And if I lose control, I will drain you dry without meaning to." "Then do not lose control," Isolde said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You have restrained yourself for 3 centuries. Surely you can manage one girl." A bitter laugh escaped him. "You have too much faith in me. Or perhaps you have too little in yourself." The words hung between them. Valerian's expression shifted, something raw flickering across his features. He reached out slowly, his fingers hovering near her cheek but not touching. "Your grandmother said something similar once," he murmured. "She called me a coward for refusing to hope." "Were you?" "Yes." His hand dropped. "I still am." Before Isolde could respond, a sound echoed from the forest beyond horses, many of them, and the clank of armor. Valerian's head snapped toward the entrance, his entire demeanor transforming from vulnerable to lethal in a heartbeat. "They are here," he said flatly. "Get on Luna, now." The chase was a nightmare of mud and darkness. Isolde clung to Luna's mane as the mare raced through the forest, Valerian and Noctis a shadow ahead. Behind them, torches bobbed like malevolent stars, and the hunters' shouts cut through the rain. "This way," Valerian called, veering left toward a ravine. Luna followed without hesitation, her hooves finding purchase on the slick slope. They descended into a narrow gorge, where the storm's fury was magnified, water rushing through the stone channel like a living thing. An arrow hissed past Isolde's ear. "Down!" Valerian roared. She flattened herself against Luna's neck as more arrows flew. One struck the rock beside them, splintering on impact. Valerian wheeled Noctis around, placing himself between Isolde and their pursuers. "Go," he commanded. "Follow the gorge north. Do not stop. I will not leave you. You will obey me." His eyes flashed with an authority that brooked no argument. "I will find you. I swear it." Isolde wanted to protest, but Luna was already moving, driven by some instinct tied to the bond. The mare carried her deeper into the gorge, while behind them, the sounds of battle erupted steel on steel, screams abruptly silenced. She rode until her arms ached and the gorge widened into a valley shrouded in mist. There, she finally stopped, Luna panting beneath her. The storm had lessened to a drizzle, and the moon broke through the clouds, casting everything in silver. Isolde waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. Her fear grew with each passing moment. What if Valerian had fallen? What if the hunters, a figure, emerged from the mist? She nearly cried out in relief, but the sound died when she saw him clearly. Valerian was covered in blood, not his own, she realized with shock, but his enemy's. It stained his hands, his coat, even his face. He looked less like a man and more like the monster the hunters claimed he was. He stopped several paces away, as if afraid to approach. "I kept my word," he said, his voice rough. "They will not follow us again." Isolde dismounted slowly. She should have been horrified, repulsed. Instead, she felt only a strange ache in her chest. Not pity, but understanding. "You are hurt," she said, noticing a gash along his ribs where armor had torn through fabric and flesh. "It will heal. Not if you do not feed." Valerian closed his eyes. "Isolde, I am not afraid of you." She crossed the distance between them, her scarred palm outstretched. "I am afraid of losing the only person standing between me and death. So stop being noble and accept what I offer freely." His eyes opened, and in them, she saw the war between hunger and honor. Then, slowly, he took her hand. His thumb traced the crescent scar, and when he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "This will create a bond deeper than the covenant. Once I taste you willingly, there will be no severing the tie between us. Do you understand?" "Yes." "And you still offer?" "Yes." Valerian brought her wrist to his lips and bit down. The world dissolved into sensation, pain, and pleasure indistinguishable, her heartbeat sinking with his. She felt his hunger, yes, but also his restraint, his fear, his desperate hope that he would not harm her. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were no longer cold. They burned. The shadow-fell mountains rose like broken teeth against the pre-dawn sky. Isolde rode in a daze, her wrist bound with clean linen Valerian had produced from his saddlebag. The bite mark throbbed with a warmth that spread through her entire arm, and she could feel him, his presence, his emotions like a second heartbeat beneath her own. Valerian had spoken little since feeding. He rode ahead, his posture rigid, and Isolde wondered if he regretted what had passed between them. The blood exchange had been intimate in a way she had not anticipated, more profound than any physical touch. She could still taste his guilt. "We are close," Valerian said, breaking the silence. He gestured toward a cleft between two peaks. "The sanctuary lies beyond that pass. Once we cross the threshold, the wards will recognize you as my bonded companion. You will be able to enter freely. And the hunters? They will find only stone and mist. The wards have stood for 1,000 years. They will not fail now." As they climbed the narrow path, Isolde noticed markings carved into the rock symbols that seemed to shift when viewed directly. The air grew colder, sharper, and the mist thickened until she could barely see Luna's ears. Then, abruptly, they emerged into clarity. The sanctuary was a fortress carved from the mountain itself. Towers of black stone rose from the rock, connected by bridges that defied gravity. Stained glass windows glowed with inner light, depicting scenes Isolde could not decipher. At the gates stood a figure cloaked in gray. "Valerian," the figure greeted, his voice like distant thunder. "It has been too long." "Theron." Valerian dismounted and clasped the other man's forearm. "I require sanctuary for myself and my companion." Theron's gaze shifted to Isolde, and she suppressed a shiver. His eyes were golden, inhuman. "This is the girl? The one bound by Eleanor's covenant?" "Yes, she is mortal. For now." Theron studied her a moment longer, then nodded. "The sanctuary is yours, old friend, but know that the Scarlet Dawn has allies in high places. They will petition the Elder Council to revoke your protection." "Let them try," Valerian said coldly. Theron smiled, sharp and predatory. Still the arrogant prince, some things never change. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the gates. "Enter. I will see to the horses and ensure your wards are reinforced." Valerian inclined his head in thanks, then turned to Isolde. "Come." She followed him through gates that swung open without touch, into a courtyard where fountains ran with water that shimmered like mercury. The air hummed with power, and Isolde's scar pulsed in response. "What is this place?" she breathed. "A remnant of the old world," Valerian replied. "Before the schism, before humanity divided into hunters and hunted, there were places where both could coexist. This sanctuary is one of the last." He led her into a tower and up a spiral staircase that seemed endless. Finally, they reached a chamber at the summit. It was furnished simply a bed draped in dark velvet, a desk stacked with books, a fireplace where flames burned without fuel. "You will stay here," Valerian said. I have matters to attend to, but Theron will ensure you want for nothing. Where will you be? Below. There is a crypt where I must consult certain texts. The curse is more complex than I initially believed, and now that the bond is active, we must move carefully. Isolde stepped closer. Valerian, what happened in the valley? Was necessary, he interrupted, his tone carefully neutral. Nothing more. But she could feel the lie through the bond. She could feel his turmoil, the way her blood had affected him more deeply than he would admit. You felt something, she pressed. When you fed, I felt it too. You are not empty. You were, do not. His voice turned sharp. Do not romanticize what I am, Isolde. I am a predator who took from you because I was weak. That is all. You are lying. He turned on her, and for a moment she saw the full weight of his centuries, the loneliness, the self-loathing, the desperate hope he refused to acknowledge. What do you want me to say? He demanded. That your blood sang to me in ways I have not felt since I was mortal? That for one moment I remembered what it was to desire something beyond survival? Would that please you? It would be honest. Valerian looked away. Honesty is a luxury I cannot afford, not when your life depends on my control. He moved toward the door, but Isolde caught his sleeve. Tell me about the curse. Not the covenant, the curse. What did you do to deserve 3 centuries of emptiness? His jaw tightened. I loved. The admission hung in the air, stark and raw. I was mortal once, Valerian continued, his voice distant, a prince of a kingdom long turned to dust. I fell in love with a woman I should not have, a sorceress bound to my father's enemy. When war came, I chose her over my kingdom. My people fell, my family burned, and in her grief at what my love had cost, she cursed me. He finally met Isolde's eyes. She took my capacity for love and bound it in a bloodright, scattering pieces of it across her descendants. Your grandmother carried one piece, you carry another. But even if I reclaim them all, there is no guarantee the man who loved will return. 300 years is a long time to be hollow. Isolde's throat tightened. Do you want to feel again? I do not know, Valerian whispered. Emptiness is safe. Feeling is dangerous. Before she could respond, he slipped from her grasp and left the chamber, the door closing with a soft finality. Isolde stood alone in the tower, her hand pressed to her chest where the bond thrummed like a second heart. She did not yet understand the full depth of what bound them, but one truth was becoming clear. Breaking Valerian's curse would require more than blood. It would require trust, something neither of them had learned to give. Isolde spent the following day exploring the sanctuary under Theron's watchful eye. The golden-eyed guardian moved through the fortress like a shadow, appearing whenever she strayed too close to locked doors or warded chambers. He spoke little, but his presence was oddly comforting, a reminder that she was not entirely alone in this strange place. How long have you known Valerian? Isolde asked as they walked through a library filled with books bound in materials she dared not identify. 200 years, give or take. Theron pulled a tome from a high shelf with ease. I was freshly turned when I found him in the ruins of Corvain. He saved me from hunters who would have staked me in my sleep. I have owed him a debt ever since. Was he different, then? Theron's expression turned thoughtful. He was less, defeated. The first century of the curse, he fought it, traveled the world seeking a way to break it. But when every attempt failed, he withdrew. The Valerian you know is a ghost of the man he was. Isolde traced the spine of a book, its title written in a language she could not read. He said his lover cursed him. Do you know her name? Seraphine Ashmar, a blood witch of considerable power. Theron's voice held a note of caution. She is long dead, but her magic endures. The curse was designed to be unbreakable, a punishment eternal. Then how can the covenant succeed? Because your grandmother found a loophole. Theron opened the tome, revealing pages covered in arcane diagrams. Seraphine scattered pieces of Valerian's capacity for love across her bloodline, intending them to be lost forever. But Eleanor was Seraphine's great-great-granddaughter. When she discovered the truth, She made a deal. She would gather the fragments and bind them to her own lineage, to be returned when the right heir came of age. Isolde stared at the diagrams. So I carry a piece of his soul? 2 pieces, actually. One from Eleanor, passed through your mother, and one you were born with a fragment. Seraphine hid in her womb before her death, unknowingly passed to her children. The revelation struck Isolde like a physical blow. I have carried part of him my entire life. Yes, that is why the bond recognized you so violently. You are not merely connected, you are intertwined. To break the curse, Valerian must reclaim all the fragments. But the final piece. Theron hesitated. What? Isolde demanded. The final piece can only be returned through an act of true, freely given love. Not lust, not obligation. Love, and Valerian must be capable of recognizing it, which means he must already be partially whole. Isolde's mind raced. A paradox. Precisely. He must feel in order to receive the piece that will allow him to feel fully. It is elegant cruelty. Then we are doomed to fail. Theron closed the book gently. Perhaps, or perhaps the covenant is already working in ways we do not yet understand. Tell me, girl, when he fed from you, what did you feel? Isolde hesitated, heat rising to her cheeks. Pain, at first, then connection. I felt his loneliness, his fear, his hope. Theron finished softly. You felt hope. That is not the emptiness of a cursed man, Isolde. That is the beginning of something more. Before she could respond, a bell tolled deep, resonant, and filled with urgency. Theron's expression turned grim. The outer wards. Someone approaches. They found Valerian in the courtyard, already armed. He wore leather and steel now, no trace of the aristocrat remaining. When his eyes met Isolde's, they were hard. Stay inside, he ordered. What is happening? The Scarlet Dawn has sent an emissary under banner of truce. They wish to negotiate. His lip curled with disdain. It is a trap. How do you know? Because they do not negotiate, they exterminate. Theron materialized beside them, twin blades strapped to his back. Let them come, the wards will hold. The wards will not stop a martyr with a blood bomb, Valerian countered. They mean to breach the sanctuary and kill every vampire within. Isolde is simply a convenient excuse. Isolde's breath caught. Then send me out, if they want me. No. Valerian's voice was absolute. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. You will not sacrifice yourself for my sins. They are not your sins. They are. The words tore from him, raw and anguished. Every death, every hunt, every broken soul they trace back to my choices. I destroyed a kingdom for love, and the world has heeded my kind ever since. Do not ask me to watch you pay for my arrogance. Isolde stared up at him, seeing past the armor to the man beneath ancient, weary, and terrified. Then do not ask me to hide while you face them alone, she said quietly. Valerian's grip tightened fractionally, then released. He stepped back, something shifting in his expression. You are insufferably brave. I learned from my grandmother. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Yes, you did. The bell tolled again, closer now. Theron moved toward the gates, his golden eyes glowing. They are at the threshold. 12 hunters, full regalia, and something else, a cloaked figure. Female. Powerful. Valerian went very still. Describe her. Tall. Dark hair. Eyes like no. Valerian's voice turned to ice. It cannot be. Who? Isolde demanded. He did not answer. Instead, he strode toward the gates, and after a moment's hesitation, Isolde followed. What she saw through the iron bars made her blood freeze. The hunters stood in formation, their leader at the forefront. But behind them, shrouded in a cloak of midnight blue, stood a woman whose presence radiated power. When she lowered her hood, Isolde gasped. The woman's face was beautiful and terrible. Ageless, yet marked by suffering. And when her eyes burning gold mid Valerian's, she smiled. "Hello, beloved," Seraphine Ashmar said softly. "Did you miss me?" The world tilted. Isolde gripped the gate for support, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Seraphine Ashmar was dead, Theron had said so, yet here she stood, alive and impossibly beautiful, her gaze fixed on Valerian with an intensity that made Isolde's stomach churn. "You are dead," Valerian said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I watched you burn 3 centuries ago." "You watched an illusion burn," Seraphine corrected. Her voice was silk over steel. "Did you truly believe I would allow my enemies to end me so easily? I have walked this earth as long as you, beloved, waiting for the moment when the curse would ripen." "Ripen?" Theron's hand moved to his blade. "What game is this, witch?" Seraphine's smile widened. "No game. A harvest. You see, the curse was never meant to punish Valerian alone. It was designed to cultivate something far more valuable, a soulbound." She gestured toward Isolde. "This girl carries fragments of Valerian's capacity for love, infused with 300 years of longing and sorrow. When those fragments are returned, they will not merely restore him. They will create a bond so powerful that it can fuel magic beyond comprehension, immortality, resurrection, the rewriting of fate itself." Isolde's blood turned to ice. "You intend to steal the bond?" "Steal?" Seraphine laughed. "Child, I created it. I wove the curse, knowing that one of my descendants would eventually become the key. I simply did not anticipate having to wait so long." Valerian's hands clenched into fists. "You used me, used your own bloodline." "I loved you," Seraphine said, and for the first time, genuine emotion flickered across her face. "But love is not enough to change the world. Power is. And the soul-bound bond between you and this girl will give me the power to reshape reality, to undo the schism, to restore the old ways." "By sacrificing Isolde," Valerian said flatly, "a small price for the salvation of thousands." Seraphine extended her hand. "Give her to me, and I will release you from the curse. You will be free, Valerian, free to feel, to love, to live as you were meant to. All I ask is one mortal life." Isolde felt the weight of the choice like a blade against her throat. She looked at Valerian, searching his face for some clue to his thoughts. But his expression was unreadable, carved from stone. "No," he said simply. Seraphine's smile faded. "You would choose her over freedom? I would choose her over eternity." The words hung in the air, stark and final. Isolde's breath caught, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Through the bond, she felt Valerian's resolve, unwavering, absolute. He meant it. Seraphine's expression turned cold. "Then you are a fool, and you will die a fool." She raised her hand, and the ground beneath the sanctuary trembled. The hunters drew their weapons, but Seraphine waved them back. "I do not need your blades. I will bring the mountain down upon them myself." Power gathered around her, visible as threads of golden light. The wards screamed in response, a high, keening sound that made Isolde's teeth ache. "Theron," Valerian barked. "Get Isolde to the crypt, now. You cannot fight her alone. I am not asking. Go." Theron grabbed Isolde's arm, but she twisted free. "I will not leave you." "You will," Valerian said, and his eyes met hers, pale, burning, alive with something she had never seen before. "I have spent 300 years empty. I will not spend a single moment of feeling by letting you die." Before she could protest, he moved. The gates exploded outward, and Valerian became a blur of motion, closing the distance between himself and Seraphine in a heartbeat. They collided with a force that shattered stone, golden light and shadow warring in a maelstrom of power. "Now!" Theron roared, dragging Isolde back. She fought him, screaming Valerian's name, but the Guardian was far stronger. He hauled her through the courtyard and into the depths of the fortress, the sounds of battle fading behind them. The crypt was vast and cold, lined with sarcophagi that bore names in languages long dead. Theron released Isolde and began tracing symbols on the floor with a blade, his movements precise. What are you doing? Isolde demanded. A severance ward. If Seraphine kills Valerian, the bond will try to take you with him. This will sever it before it drains your life. I do not want it severed. You do not have a choice. Theron's voice was hard. Valerian gave his life to ensure yours continues. Do not waste his sacrifice. Isolde sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Through the bond, she could feel Valerian fighting his determination, his pain, his fear, not for himself, but for her. Please, she whispered. There must be another way. Theron paused, his golden eyes softening. There is one, but it requires your consent, and it will change you forever. Tell me. The final fragment of Valerian's soul is locked within you. To release it, you must willingly offer your mortality. Not death transformation, you would become what he is, immortal, bound to him through blood and magic, and the power of that bond might be enough to counter Seraphine. Isolde looked up, her heart pounding. I would become a vampire? A soul-bound vampire. Rarer than rare. The bond would be unbreakable, your lives intertwined for eternity. You would feel what he feels, want what he wants. There would be no separation, no privacy. It is a prison as much as a gift. And Valerian, would he be whole? If you survived the transformation, yes. The final fragment would merge with him through the bond. He would feel fully, love fully. But he would also be bound to you forever. Isolde thought of Valerian standing before Seraphine, willing to die rather than surrender her. She thought of the loneliness she had felt through the bond, the 3 centuries of emptiness he had endured. She thought of her grandmother, who had believed he could be saved. Do it, she said. Theron studied her for a long moment, then nodded. He drew a knife silver, etched with runes, and pressed it to his palm. Blood welled, bright and inhuman. Drink, he commanded, and pray your love is strong enough to survive what comes next. Isolde took his hand and drank. The world exploded into fire. Pain was an inadequate word for what Isolde experienced. It was as though every nerve in her body had been set alight, her veins molten channels of agony. She screamed, distantly aware of Theron's voice chanting in a language that resonated in her bones. The crypt spun around her, the sarcophagi blurring into streaks of gray and shadow. Then, abruptly, the pain ceased. She lay gasping on the cold stone, her body trembling. But something was different. She could hear the thrum of blood through Theron's veins, the distant echo of battle above. She could smell stone and ancient dust, and something else power, raw and intoxicating, rise. Theron commanded softly. Isolde pushed herself to her feet, and the world snapped into crystalline focus. Every detail was sharp, the etchings on the sarcophagi, the individual grains of dust suspended in the air, the faint glow of magic still clinging to her skin. What have you done to me? She whispered. I have awakened your blood. You are not yet fully turned, that requires Valerian's venom, but you are no longer mortal. The transformation has begun. Theron's gaze was solemn. Now you must complete it. Find Valerian, offer him the final fragment, and pray Seraphine does not kill you both before the bond solidifies. Isolde nodded, her fear eclipsed by a strange, fierce clarity. She could feel Valerian through the bond, his strength waning, his desperation mounting. He was dying. She ran. The courtyard was a ruin. Isolde emerged into chaos-shattered stone, scorch marks blackening the walls, and at the center, Valerian and Seraphine locked in combat. The witch wielded magic like a blade, golden light slashing through the air. Valerian moved with lethal precision, but he was slower now, blood staining his leather armor. Seraphine saw Isolde first. Her eyes widened, then narrowed with fury. Clever girl, but a half-transformation will not save you. She flung a bolt of magic toward Isolde. Valerian threw himself into its path, taking the blast in his chest. He fell hard, smoke rising from the wound. No! Isolde screamed. She ran to him, falling to her knees beside his broken body. His eyes fluttered open, pale and unfocused. "You should have stayed below," he rasped. "I will not let you die for me," Isolde said fiercely. She tore at her wrist with her teeth sharper now, she realized, and pressed the bleeding wound to his mouth. "Drink. Complete the bond. Let me save you as you saved me." Valerian's eyes widened. "Isolde, if I drink now, the transformation will finish. You will be bound to me forever. You do not understand." "I understand perfectly." She cupped his face, her blood dripping onto his lips. "I choose this. I choose you. Now drink, damn you, and live." For a heartbeat, he hesitated. Then, with a sound that was half growl, half sob, he bit down. The world shattered into light. Isolde felt the fragments within her shift. The pieces of Valerian's soul, recognizing their origin. They flowed from her into him through blood and magic, a torrent of feeling that had been locked away for 3 centuries. And Valerian felt it all. Love, raw and overwhelming, not the infatuation of youth, but something deeper forged in understanding, tempered by sacrifice. He felt Isolde's fear and courage, her determination to save him even at the cost of her humanity. He felt her acceptance of what he was, monsters and all. The curse shattered. Power erupted from their joined forms. Silver and gold, light and shadow intertwined. The force of it threw Seraphine back, her magic dissipating like smoke. She hit the ground hard, her expression one of shock. "Impossible," she whispered. "The bond should have required willing love from you both." "It did," Valerian said, rising. His voice was no longer empty. It resonated with life, with emotion barely contained. He pulled Isolde to her feet, their hands clasped, the bond between them visible as threads of light. "You designed the curse to harvest power, Seraphine, but you underestimated the very thing you sought to exploit. Love is not a resource to be consumed. It is a force that grows stronger when given freely." He stepped forward, and the power surrounding them intensified. "You lose." Seraphine's face twisted with rage. She raised her hands for a final strike, and collapsed. Behind her stood Theron, his blade buried in her back. "You talk too much, witch," he said mildly. Seraphine gasped, golden blood spilling from her lips. She looked up at Valerian, and for a moment her expression softened. "I did love you," she whispered, "in my own way." "I know," Valerian said quietly. "But love without respect is just another form of chains." Seraphine's eyes dulled and she crumbled to ash, her magic unraveling with her death. Silence fell over the courtyard. Isolde swayed, exhaustion crashing over her. Valerian caught her, lowering them both to the ground. She could feel the bond settling between them, no longer chaotic, but steady. A heartbeat shared between 2 souls. "You are insane," Valerian murmured, pressing his forehead to hers. "You beautiful, reckless, impossible woman." "You are welcome," Isolde said, and laughed, a sound edged with hysteria and relief. Valerian pulled back, his eyes searching hers. They were no longer cold. They burned with an intensity that stole her breath. "I can feel again," he said, wonder threading his voice. "Everything. Fear, joy, hope." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Love. I can feel love, Isolde. After 300 years, I can finally feel." His voice broke. Isolde kissed him. It was not graceful or practiced. It was desperate and grateful, a promise sealed in blood and magic. Valerian responded with equal fervor, his hands tangling in her hair, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the 2 of them, soul-bound, eternal, whole. When they finally broke apart, Theron was smiling. "Well," the Guardian said dryly, "I suppose congratulations are in order." Isolde laughed again, and this time Valerian joined her. The curse was broken. The transformation completed over the course of 3 days. Isolde lay in the tower chamber, her body racked by alternating waves of fire and ice as the vampire blood rewrote her mortality. Valerian never left her side, his presence a constant anchor through the bond. When she screamed, he held her. When she wept, he whispered reassurances in languages dead for millennia, and when, on the third night, her heart finally stilled and then restarted with a slower, stronger rhythm, he was there to meet her gaze as she opened eyes that now glowed faintly silver. "Welcome to eternity," he said softly. Isolde sat up slowly, marveling at the world around her. Every sense was heightened beyond measure. She could hear the heartbeat of a bird nesting in the eaves, smell the rain gathering in clouds miles away, see the individual threads of light woven through the room's magic. "Is it always like this?" she breathed. "You will learn to control it," Valerian assured her. "In time, the intensity will fade to something manageable. But the wonder? That never leaves." He helped her to her feet, and she swayed, adjusting to her new strength. When she caught sight of herself in a mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her features were sharper, her skin luminous, her eyes holding an otherworldly gleam. "I look like one of the paintings," she murmured. "A Gothic ghost." "You look like yourself," Valerian corrected, moving to stand behind her. In the mirror, their reflections were faint but present, old vampire lore proven false, only more so. Isolde met his eyes in the glass. "What happens now? Now we rebuild." He rested his hands on her shoulders, his touch warm despite their shared chill. "The Scarlet Dawn will not cease their hunt simply because Seraphine is gone. We must establish a new accord. One that recognizes the soul-bound as neither human nor vampire, but something beyond both. And if they refuse, then we fight." His expression turned grim. "But I am no longer alone in that fight. You stand with me now, as I stand with you. The bond makes us formidable, Isolde. Together, we can reshape the balance of power." She turned in his arms, studying his face. "You have changed. Not just the curse breaking, something more." Valerian smiled, and it transformed him. "I have hope. For the first time in centuries, I believe the future holds something other than emptiness. That is your doing." "Our doing," Isolde corrected. He leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Yes. Ours." Over the following weeks, Isolde learned what it meant to be soul-bound. The connection between her and Valerian was unlike anything she could have imagined. She felt his emotions as though they were her own, the quiet satisfaction when he read, the fierce protectiveness when danger threatened, the deep, abiding love he no longer tried to hide. And he felt hers in turn, attuned to her every joy and sorrow. It was overwhelming at first, but gradually they learned to navigate the bond, to give each other space within their shared consciousness, to communicate without words, to fight as a single unit when Theron trained them in combat. "You move like water," Theron observed one evening as they sparred in the courtyard. "Anticipating each other's strikes before they land. I have never seen a soul-bound pair so attuned." "We had good motivation to succeed," Valerian said dryly. Isolde laughed, disarming him with a twist of her wrist she had learned only that morning. Valerian caught her blade bare-handed, his grin wicked, and pulled her close. "Cheater," she accused. "Victor," he countered and kissed her thoroughly. Theron groaned. "I preferred you when you were emotionally repressed." But there was warmth in his golden eyes, and Isolde knew he was pleased. The fortress had become a home in the months since Seraphine's death, a sanctuary, not just from enemies but from enemies. News reached them in early winter. The Scarlet Dawn had fractured. Many hunters, disillusioned by Seraphine's manipulation, had laid down their weapons. Others, more fanatical, had retreated into the mountains to plot revenge. But a third faction, pragmatists and scholars, had reached out to Valerian, requesting a meeting. "They wished to negotiate terms," Valerian said. Reading the letter by firelight, "They acknowledge that the soul-bound bond changes the equation. They want to establish boundaries, rules of engagement." "Do you trust them?" Isolde asked, curled against his side. "No, but I trust that they fear us enough to be sincere." He set the letter aside and pulled her closer. "What do you think? Should we meet them?" It still surprised her, his deference to her opinion. The ancient vampire lord, consulting a woman who had been mortal mere months ago. but that was the nature of their bond-equal partnership, forged in fire. "We should," Isolde said slowly, "but not as supplicants. We meet them as representatives of a new order. Soulbound are neither human nor vampire. We are proof that coexistence is possible." Valerian's smile was proud. "Spoken like a queen. I am no queen. Not yet." He tilted her chin up, his gaze intense. "But you will be, Isolde. We will build something lasting, a court where soulbound and turned and mortal can find refuge. A place where the old hatreds can finally be laid to rest. And if we fail? Then we fail together," Valerian said simply. "But I do not intend to fail. I have 300 years of stubbornness to draw upon." Isolde laughed, the sound bright and free. "Then we shall succeed through sheer obstinacy." "Precisely." They sat in companionable silence, watching the fire dance. Through the bond, Isolde felt Valerian's contentment, a deep, quiet joy that needed no words. She felt his love, constant and unwavering, and returned it in full measure. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the Shadowfell Mountains in white. The world was still dangerous, still uncertain, but within the sanctuary's walls, two souls intertwined had found something rarer than immortality. They had found home. Spring came to the Shadowfell Mountains with unexpected gentleness. Isolde stood on the highest balcony of the fortress, watching the first green shoots push through the snow. Behind her, the sound of voices drifted from the great hall, delegates from the Scarlet Dawn, scholars from vampire enclaves, and a handful of newly discovered soulbound pairs who had sought sanctuary. The summit had been Valerian's idea, but it was Isolde who had drafted the initial terms. The Accord of Shadows, they called it, a framework for peaceful coexistence, built on mutual respect and enforced boundaries. It was imperfect, fragile, but it was a beginning. "You look pensive," Valerian said, appearing at her side with the eerie silence she had come to expect. "I am thinking about my grandmother," Isolde admitted. "She spent decades preparing for a future she would never see. I wish she could witness this." "She can," Valerian said quietly. "Through you. Everything you are, everything you have accomplished, it is her legacy as much as your own." Isolde leaned into him, drawing comfort from his presence. The bond between them had deepened over the months, becoming as natural as breathing. She could no longer imagine existence without it. "The delegates are asking for you," Valerian continued. "They wish to formalize the treaty before nightfall." "And what do you wish?" He smiled, tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear. "I wish to dance with you beneath the stars as we should have at your engagement ball. But duty calls." "Later then," Isolde promised. "Tonight we dance." The treaty signing was a solemn affair. Representatives from each faction stepped forward to place their seals upon the document thereon for the turned vampires. A silver-haired woman named Mira for the Scarlet Dawn's moderates, and Valerian and Isolde together for the soulbound. "Let it be known," Valerian declared, his voice carrying through the hall, "that this accord is not a surrender, but a choice. We choose to see each other not as enemies, but as inheritors of a world too long divided. We choose to build bridges instead of pyres." "And if the bridges burn?" challenged one of the hunters, a young man with scars crisscrossing his face. "Then we build them again," Isolde said firmly, "as many times as it takes. Peace is not a destination, it is a practice one we must commit to daily." The young hunter studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then I will practice with you, Lady Isolde." The title still felt strange, but Isolde accepted it with grace. She had become a symbol, she realized, proof that transformation was possible, that old hatreds could be transcended. The ceremony concluded with a shared meal, a deliberate echo of human and vampire traditions. Wine and blood, bread and rare meat, all served side by side. It was awkward, stilted, but no one drew weapons. It was progress. Later, as promised, Valerian led Isolde to the courtyard. Theron had strung lanterns between the towers, their light soft and golden. A single musician-turned vampire with a gift for the violin played a haunting melody. It was not the grand ball Isolde had once envisioned, but it was perfect. Valerian bowed formally, extending his hand. May I have this dance, my lady? Isolde curtsied, suppressing a smile. You may, my lord. They moved together with the ease of long practice, the bond guiding their steps. Around them, the fortress was quiet, the delegates retired to their chambers. For this moment, they were simply two people who had fought their way to happiness. Do you regret it? Valerian asked as they spun. Giving up mortality? Never, Isolde said without hesitation. Do you regret breaking the curse? Not for a single heartbeat. They danced until the moon reached its zenith, their movements slowing until they simply swayed, foreheads pressed together. I love you, Valerian whispered, the words still new and precious on his tongue. I will love you through all the centuries to come. And I love you, Isolde replied, my dark lord, my soul bound. He kissed her then, deep and lingering, and the bond flared between them, silver and gold, shadow and light, perfectly balanced. When they finally broke apart, Theron was leaning against a pillar, arms crossed. Are you two quite finished being sickeningly romantic? He asked, though his tone was fond. Not even remotely, Valerian said, pulling Isolde closer. You will have to endure centuries of this, old friend. Theron sighed dramatically. I suppose there are worse fates. Isolde laughed, the sound echoing through the courtyard, and in that moment, surrounded by allies hard-won and a love that had conquered curses, she knew true contentment. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be setbacks, betrayals, battles yet to fight, but they would face them together, soul-bound, eternal, unbreakable. The curse was broken, the covenant fulfilled, and their story, tragic, intimate, dangerous, and beautiful, was only beginning. 10 years passed in the blink of an immortal eye. The Accord of Shadows held, though it was tested repeatedly. Rogue hunters attacked outlying settlements. Traditionalist vampires refused to honor the terms. But each time, Valerian and Isolde stood as mediators, their bond a living testament to the possibility of unity. The sanctuary grew. What had once been a fortress became a city Nyxhaven, they called it, after Valerian's bloodline. Soul-bound pairs arrived from across the world, drawn by tales of the refuge. Mortals seeking knowledge came to study in the libraries. Even a handful of turned vampires, weary of endless conflict, laid down their weapons and took up trades. It was not paradise, but it was a place where hope had room to grow. Isolde stood in the tower chamber that had once been her prison and was now her sanctuary. The room had changed over the years, filled with books and artifacts, mementos of a decade spent building something new. Through the window, she could see the city below, lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. Somewhere down there, Valerian was meeting with the city council, mediating a dispute over trade routes. Through the bond, she felt his mild exasperation and bit back a smile. Even after a decade, the bond never ceased to amaze her. It had not dulled with familiarity. If anything, it had deepened, becoming as essential as her heartbeat. She knew Valerian as she knew herself, and he knew her with equal intimacy. It was, she reflected, the greatest gift of immortality. A sound drew her attention. She turned to find Valerian in the doorway, his expression soft. The meeting ended early, she asked. I delegated, he said, crossing to her. Theron is handling the trade dispute. I decided my time was better spent elsewhere. Oh, and where might that be? Here. He pulled her into his arms, resting his chin atop her head. With you, always with you. Isolde melted into his embrace, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart against her cheek. We have eternity, she murmured. Surely you can spare a few hours for governance. I spent 300 years in governance, Valerian countered. I have earned the right to be selfish with my time. She laughed softly. Selfish? You, who spend every waking moment ensuring this city thrives. I have excellent priorities. He pulled back slightly, his pale eyes searching hers. Tell me, are you happy, Isolde? Truly? It was a question he asked periodically, as though afraid her contentment might slip away unnoticed. Isolde understood the fear. When you had spent lifetimes empty, happiness felt fragile. I am, she assured him, cupping his face. I am happy, fulfilled, and endlessly grateful that I danced with a stranger at a masquerade ball. Valerian's smile was radiant, as am I. They stood together as night fell fully, the city below coming alive with lamplight and laughter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, it always did. But tonight, they had each other, and for two souls bound by blood, magic, and a love that had conquered curses, that was enough. Far to the south, in a village on the edge of mortal lands, a young woman with eyes like storm clouds woke from a dream of silver light and ancient promises. She pressed a hand to her chest, where a crescent scar had appeared overnight, and the covenant, ever patient, began to stir once more. The end.